Hello, everyone, and we are live yet again. And this is my author's chat of the week, and I am just going to keep my eye out for my co-host this week. She should be on momentarily. But as always, I always like to start off with a base question. What are you reading today? And as I keep my eye out to see if my co-host can jump on, I see her. Don't see you. I see you watching my live. I see you there. Here we go. Watch this. Magic. Maybe. Temporarily. Always takes a moment.
I made it.
Hello!
Hi.
Yay! Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good! Oh, I like your top, by the way.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So thank you for coming out today and doing one of these. I don't know if you've ever heard any of mine before, but I keep them pretty casual, and pretty much you're my co-host of the week, so I let you introduce yourself first and what you're about, what you write, whatever your spiel is or your pitch, and then it's okay. And then I'll do the same on my end, and then from there we'll just go where the day takes us, answering questions as they pop in, etc.
Okay.
You got
it. I'm Kennedy Sutton, and I am the author of The Sneaky Lass and the Silver Locket books, which are a rapid release pirate historical romantasy. And they're in the vein of historical romance, but with fantasy elements, sort of like how Outlander has those fantasy elements like woven within the story. And that's pretty much my spiel. I release one every 12 weeks. And
wow, that is rapid release.
Yes, and there's going to be 7 books in the main series, 2 prequels, one of which is already out, and at least 1 spin-off series. So I've got a lot in the works.
That's fantastic. So let me ask you, if you're turning them around pretty quickly, how much are they? I'm trying to figure out how to word it. How many of them are ready to go whenever that 12 weeks? Or I don't know how much prep work. Are you writing them and then just releasing as you write? Do you have a couple in the background? I don't know how you're doing this. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it.
So I had written the rough drafts of the first 6 books when I reached out to my editor to release book 1. So when I say every 12 weeks, that means at the beginning of that 12-week time, I pick out the next rough draft, get it up to snuff, send it to my editor. We edit the fire out of it and then release it. So all of these, so far, I'm still on books that I've already written. And since I began rapid releasing these, I've written an additional 4 books. So we're just going.
You are a fast writer.
I average about 60,000 words a month.
That's fantastic. I wish I could say the same, but I think it's because the way I split my day, like the latter half of the day is always on the marketing, the promotion stuff, that I don't get that word count in as some other authors do, but that's fantastic. And for anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Katharine Wibell. I'm a fantasy author. I write epic fantasy. I have 3 series at the moment. See my little turn it just a slight thing, voila. Okay, so 3 series at the moment. My first one is my debut series, and it's called The Incarn Saga. There are 4 books in that. It is a complete series, and it is a shifter fantasy based on a kingdom on the verge of war. My young adult series is called The Jed Chronicles. There are 2 out. The 3rd one is running a Kickstarter at the moment. Hello. Kickstarter at the moment, which is new to me, trying to see how I can use that platform to help fund the upfront costs of publishing when you are a self-published author. And you're self-published, are you not?
Yes.
Yes, so that's what I'm testing out right now, but it is a portal fantasy, epic fantasy, high fantasy, it goes on and on. Magical multiverse full of all sorts of mythological beast beings and the like, and it falls into the Chosen One archetype. And then my final series is a dark Viking fantasy, so it is a dark retelling of Norse myth. And for the historical side of things, that's probably the one I've done the most history research on, because I did want to make the Vikings or the people during the Viking era as realistic as possible. So I put a lot of research in. So let me ask you, because you're calling yourself, and I love this term, I've heard it a couple times now, the romantasy. So romantic fantasy vibe, but you also said you are historical. How much history do you research, or are you a historian, or what is your background to know some of this stuff?
Well, it all started with a fascination with tall ships. And I used to live by the coast off of Galveston Island, and that's where I was born and where I did a lot of my growing up. And there's a long standing history of piracy. And I wanted to delve deeper into what piracy was actually like. And so my books are based very much in early 18th century golden age of piracy. And the Navy in my books is based very much on the Royal Navy at the same time period. The biggest fantasy elements of my book is that I have created my own map and my own world for my stories, and that's just because I didn't want to be nailed down to the Caribbean and just Western colonization storylines. I really wanted to be able to branch out, and so I created worlds that are based off of the Philippines, that are heavily based in around the southern coast of the United States, Florida, the Caribbean, Texas, the Gulf area. And so I've just sort of created my own world where I went, where do I want my characters to be able to go? And then I'd create worlds based on those places. And so it involved a lot of research. I've spent a lot of time on ships and getting to know sailors and exploring tall ships and sailing. And it's been a lot of fun.
See, I wish I could do that because for me, for my, I guess the one that has the most historical elements in it, my Viking fantasy, I wish I could go on a long ship, but those aren't as easily accessible. And even tall ships aren't that easily accessible.
No,
I've only been able to, I had one day once, a bunch of tall ships came into, this was when I was living in New Orleans, and they docked up there and let everybody go on all these different tall ships. And that was pretty neat, but I've never done a long ship, and I think it would be just so much fun, kind of like you, just enjoying learning everything. So that's really neat. So how many times have you been able to go onto a long ship or tall ship? Sorry, long ship, tall ship.
Well, it just depends. Less so now because I've moved away from the coast. I now live in Tennessee. When I was living in Texas, every opportunity that I got. So the tall ship community is very tight knit these days. And, once you kind of have an in, they all start talking to you and letting you know, like, oh, my friend's going to be in Galveston Bay. Why don't you come this way? I'll get you in touch with this captain. You can get up on their ship. And so I've been on dozens and gotten to know a lot of people in that community, which is just huge and also very small. Like it's kind of like the indie book world. When you're in it, it feels like everybody's in it, but in reality, there just aren't that many left. And so lots. I've been on lots.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I see a comment popped up said we should look up Critical Role on YouTube. Now, as far as I know, Critical Role is more on the D&D side, but let me know if I'm wrong about that. Though D&D is something I do have interest in. But with that said, so what drew you to the pirate era?
Well, that's kind of complicated.
Because my first mind is, and this is also a part two, I guess, or a sub question of that question is, how much, if any, did Pirates of the Caribbean influence your love of pirates? Let me just ask that question.
Very little, actually.
Interesting. Okay.
If anything, Pirates of the Caribbean is part of why I wanted to write historically accurate pirates.
Fair enough.
I really I watched it. I really enjoy them, and I'm very much capable of watching things and enjoying them for what they are without picking them apart. But one of my favorite pastimes is watching things based in history and going, is that true? Let me look it up. Is that true? Let me look it up.
Oh yeah.
And so that's where Pirates of the Caribbean was one of those moments where I was like, I just really want somebody to create pirates the way they were, which is that they were just sailors. And they weren't necessarily like, there's all this swashbuckling adventure, and there's absolutely that in my book, but there's so many pirate stories that are just like, these were just merchantmen. They were usually angry. They were poorly treated by their captains. They weren't making enough money. And then they end up on a pirate ship, and that becomes their trade. And so I really wanted to create a pirate story where my pirates were people with people problems, not just pirate problems.
Hey, I love that. That is fantastic. Though I don't know much about true pirates, so that's something that I have to learn. I need to look up. It is a void of my knowledge. But the one fun fact that I have is that the word Viking is their word for piracy or a pirate.
Oh.
And so you would go Viking because you would go and engage in piracy, but the people we call Vikings were not called Vikings because their populace was something else entirely. Vikings were simply those who took up raiding as at least part of their occupation. So the Vikings as a whole people did not actually exist.
Oh, see, I didn't know that. You're working
See?
in a whole history I know nothing about too.
I only know the Nordic stuff, so I was gonna say I just know that. I was like, that's the only thing I know about piracy is the fact that Vikings, as we think of them, are based on a word which was their translation for what we perceive as pirates. I don't know.
They're the pirates of their day.
There you go. Well, that's so cool that you've been able to engage and meet with people historically in your community and everything to work on better writing your stories. So tell us a little bit about, because I know what I know from some of your videos because I've been following you since fairly early on when you jumped on here, but tell us about your main characters and a little bit about them.
My main character, who I would say I have two main characters. So it's Jane and Bennett. And Jane is a prostitute when we meet her in a port town. Mm-hmm. She has run away from an abusive marriage, and things are really rough for her. She wants to get out. She feels very trapped. And on a particularly rough night, she looks out into the harbor, and there's this ship that flies no flags, and it's making a lot of repairs. They seem desperate for crew. These guys are in the street being like, anybody want to come join our ship? And so that's in the back of her mind when she takes a young man into an alleyway, beats him over the head with a piece of firewood, steals his clothes, disguises herself as a man named Dixon Abels, and jumps aboard this ship desperate for crew. And while she's in that disguise, she catches the eye of Bennett Holt, the captain of that pirate ship, who is, he swings both ways, always. And he is interested romantically in Dixon. And Jane, in this disguise, starts falling for him back. And so the story of book one follows that deception.
Interesting. I like that. And you said you've planned out 7 books in the main series?
Yes, and the first 3 are published now and in Kindle Unlimited, and the 4th book comes out in March.
All right, so let me ask you. Actually, this reminded me because I see Jason Duro just jumped on. Hi, Jason. But that reminded me. Let me go ask you this question because I think talking with him kind of spurred this one into my imagination. But are you, because you said your ebooks are on KU, Kindle Unlimited, do you have print versions? If so, are they only through Amazon, or are you kind of what Jason does and have your print versions wide?
Right now, I just have my print versions on Amazon and in my Etsy shop where I sell signed copies.
Okay.
I haven't ventured out. I've looked into it, into putting my paperbacks into a wide format. Honestly, the reason I haven't done that isn't because of any big financial understanding that I have that others lack. It's just because I have 2 children. They're both under the age of 3, and I only get to write during their nap time, and all of my author stuff happens between the hours of 11 and 2 every day. And so I just haven't looked into it yet.
No, I understand. I don't have the children's side of things, but I do understand other things distracting, and I haven't had time to invest into moving some kind of with you. I have paperbacks, hardcovers through Amazon, and opportunities to get some signed copies through my Etsy, but I haven't gone wide with them yet. I hope I'm putting that on my tentatively 2024 to-do list. Not this year, too busy this year, but next year. I see Jason chiming in saying, I love hearing from someone who plans that far ahead. Yeah, I love when people plan far ahead. I mean, for me, I do like writing longer series, and I always know kind of how long they're going to be and where they're going to end up. But and I had different stages of writing, but I still feel like you're further ahead in your writing prep than I am, which I applaud thee.
The only reason I look organized is because I write them ahead of time before I tell anybody what's going on. Because I mean, my process is a dumpster fire.
Yes, and I see another chiming in. D. Carlson says, hopefully I pronounced your name right. I'm so sorry. Another mommy writer. Hello. Yes, it is. It's really, for me, I just am so impressed with everybody who are putting out works and are parents and have jobs, main jobs, side jobs, whatever you want to say, other jobs. But that's always just a huge amount to juggle, I think. And I'm always impressed when people are able to turn out books and have all that outside pressures, outside stressors, outside distractions, outside fun stuff too, fabulous things, but other things to take up your time too.
Yeah, and I've thought about, like, once my children go to school and I'll have all this time, and I wonder if I'll actually get any more done, or if it's like the reason I get so much done is because it's so, like, this is the time I have to get stuff done, so I better sit down and do it. And once I have more time, maybe I'm still gonna be like, no, these are the 3 hours I write every day. I have no idea.
Right? Yeah, nope. I mean, it's always in, no matter where you are in your life, things always structure and then restructure, and everything gets up, and you have to always try to figure out how to dedicate, your time accordingly to your craft. Jason did chime back in. He said, if you wanted to try it this month, Ingram Spark has free uploads with a promo code in February, so this next month. Because that was one thing I thought I heard. I don't know much about Ingram Sparks outside of what other authors have said, and that's one thing is, I think you pay to upload or pay to make adjustments or something between. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jason.
Both.
Hello. Book. The code is book love. There you go.
I just got sent that this morning. I've actually printed books through Ingram Spark, but I haven't sold through Ingram Spark. So I know
I didn't know you could do that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I could just print them. So what I've done is, because KDP on Amazon won't let you print books before you publish them, when I have them done ahead of time, I'll print them through Ingram Spark, and then I can start selling signed copies right out the gate, and I don't have to wait.
Very smart. See, my thing is, and again, maybe you both know a little more than I do, but there are different types of formatting structure-wise for Ingram Spark as there are as KDP, so I would have to get things formatted a little different, which shouldn't be that hard. I think the more my stress, and I keep pushing it off, is the fact I have to go back to all my cover artists and potentially get new covers formatted correctly to the Ingram Sparks, especially when you're talking about things like hardcover, because they have dust jackets and stuff. So that's a whole other expense and time commitment and, all that. So the book is written. It's there. It's just when I can dedicate the time to do those conversions. So it may not happen this next month, but I will put that on my memos. I'm making my memos on what I'm going to be trying to accomplish in February. Oh my goodness. So what are your goals this next month? Like, do you do monthly goals? Are you trying to do a release, or is this one of your writing months? Is this an editing month? Like, because you said you have these 12 weeks, so 3 months.
Well, right now, my editor is finishing up with the book that I'm releasing March 15th, and then I am going to implement line edits and copy edit the fire out of it, and then get it out to ARC readers this month. And I also am going to get her my next book this month, which is going to be a fine tangle. It comes out in June. And I am also... there's a list. It's so long.
It's okay. I have a long list. I like when I meet someone who has a long list. I like list people because that makes sense to me. That's the only way I
Yeah,
feel like I can
I
wrap my
I
head.
just finished my first round of self edits on book 5. That is going to
Woo!
release at the end of the summer, and so I'm about to undertake the next round of self edits on book 5, and then it's ongoing. It's ongoing.
Oh yeah, always, always. Like since I'm releasing 2 series simultaneously, I'm working on promoting one, editing another book, getting one to an editor, formatting, there's always something. And it's a rotation, so everything moves as smoothly as possible. I
Yes.
see, and I don't know what you see on your end, so that's one reason why I read them out loud. And also because I repurpose this video on YouTube, when people make comments, I do kind of let them know what they are at the moment because you won't see that later on. But I see Jason saying, referring to Ingram Sparks, interior formatting is basically the same, but the covers are slightly different. Both of us are awesome and inspiring. Aw, thank you. Well, hope you have a fantastic day too, Jason. Fantastic. And you're good about that. I'm like, because I have my phone set up, I'm like, I don't know if I could type a response as quickly as on the feed. I still haven't figured out all like the fun little additives you can do for lives. But
Okay.
yeah, so that's kind of cool, and that's fascinating and always inspiring to meet someone else who can figure out how to structure and work the most efficiently as possible when you're releasing work yourself. And like you said, also having a limited time to work between, you said, late morning and early afternoon. That's good.
Yeah.
So you're a midday writer. If you could choose any time today to write, when would you idealistically write? If you could structure it however you wanted it.
I am a morning person and always have been. So I would probably, if everything in my life allowed, my children just did whatever I told them to, I would probably go to bed every night at 8 p.m., wake up at 4 or 5 a.m., and then write until about 10 or 11.
Fantastic. Yeah, I call myself I call myself a morning person, not an early morning person, in the sense that I wake up at 7. Anything earlier would stress, I don't know. It would influx my whole day. But I pretty much am up and running, and I prefer to knock out as much stuff, especially writing new material in the morning.
Yeah.
So, as a mom writer, I'm assuming you have a space for yourself to get into your writing bubble at the house, or do you just have to force? Okay, I was just curious if you were able to carve out a little.
This is the first time I've sat at my desk that's tucked into the corner of the master bedroom in almost 2 months. It mostly just collects laundry, and I do all of my writing in the living room, surrounded by toys and little toddler potties and all of the things that go with having tiny children. And I write with my laptop, and no, I don't have a space. And I think that that's part of my mom author life, is there's no, like, there's people who like, and I sit down and I drink a certain brew of coffee, and I prepare my pens, and I get out my fancy keyboard that lights up when I type on it, and
I
that's
do
how
kind of want one of those down the line, but not. Yeah. I don't have
one. and that's how I get in the mindset to write. And I'm like, if I did that, I would literally never write. Like I write the notes on my phone. I write notebooks and then put it into my laptop later. I send emails to myself. It's wherever you can.
Well, I think that is a mark of someone who's dedicated to the craft of writing, because if you don't make a point of doing it and taking advantage of whenever you can, it's not going to happen. There are so many people who are like, I think I could write a book, but you don't, because, they allow distractions and they don't value
the time. And it's like, you have to make the time.
I had talked to one of my first chats I had done like this on a live was with another book talk author, A.K. Mulford, and she was saying, because she's a mom writer too, and she was saying that early on, the only time she had to dedicate it was once the kids were in bed, and then she would write until like 1 or 2 in the morning every night, and that was her time, because during the day she was working and had kids, and so that was her time, but you had to make that dedication.
Yeah.
I see a comment by David saying 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. is my best writing time too. By 2 p.m. I can't look at my own work anymore. get that. And I know for me, my writing is morning. I do a quick glance at all the socials, make sure there's no glaring emails that I'm missing, and then I get to writing in the morning. But by early afternoon, I think it's also my brain gets a little fuzzy from like just plugging in new stuff, and I know maybe the way I'm crafting my sentences is not as good as it was earlier in the morning. That's when I switch over to, okay, it's time to edit a different project, it's time to format, it's time to do some social media or prepping my newsletter or whatever I need to be doing. That's still work, but not actively typing.
Yeah. there's always plenty of that. Like the last 4 days, I haven't written hardly anything because I've been editing. And you just go, that's writing too. You know, and I try not to get discouraged by those days where it's like, you know, I've got a manuscript, I've printed it out, it's this thick, and it's just me and a red pen, and that's writing too. The books don't get to be published unless I do it. So
oh yeah, absolutely. And like one of the things that I started last year, I was very happy that I finally was able to break ground in, was starting the process of converting all my books into audiobooks. But it's weird because while the narrator has it, it's progressing and it's not taking in my time. But then once I get the audio files, I have to go and listen through it. And depending on the size of the book, you know, that could be a couple hours of dedication. That could be 17, 18 hours of dedication that is still your work. You have to go through and listen to it. And it's, you know, and if there's errors and stuff, you still have to go back and forth with that. So that's another audio editing. But
yeah,
like, you have to find time to do that. And it takes away from actively writing, but it's still helping you your long game as an author.
Yeah, that's kind of my goal for 2023 as a whole, is I want to start audiobooks. I tried learning how to do my own audiobooks. And what I discovered is that I absolutely have the ability to do that, and I do not want to. Okay. So once I did the first couple of chapters, and it was ready and it was edited, and it took me weeks and weeks and weeks. And I know that I'd get faster as I did it more, and yada yada yada. It's like I don't want to spend this much time in my linen closet in the dark narrating my own books when I could be writing. And so my goal for this year is to get the money together to hire an audiobook narrator and get my books on audiobook.
And for anybody who's listening who's on the author side of thing and is curious about audio, I know through the platform, and there are other platforms too, but one of the big ones is ACX, which is for Audible, and they also distribute through iTunes as well. You do have 3 choices predominantly. You can narrate yourself, you can pay a narrator in full, and you can go 50-50 with a narrator for 7 years, where that means you have no upfront cost, but you're splitting all your profits that you make. And so between my 3 projects, I am doing 2 pay in full at the moment, and 1 we're doing 50-50. So I'm trying a little bit of everything to see what works best for me long term, and they're just different options. I don't think I could narrate it myself, though. I know how I want the characters to sound, and I'm bad at making my voice sound like multiple characters. Yeah. And I have no idea about the sound editing part. That is so beyond me. I would rather hire a professional or work with a professional and be like, please help me.
Yeah, right.
So and this is just as you're going forward and thinking about it, just
you have an awesome day too, David.
Yay, you too. But just to ask you a question, just in case you haven't thought about it yet, if you are looking into audiobooks for this next year, have you considered, do you want a male narrator, a female narrator, both, one for each character? What would you want? Because you said you have 2 main characters in your first book, so have you thought of that?
And they carry through the whole main series, so that's actually something that I haven't sorted out yet. Is I think ideally I would have 2, especially in my later books where I have dual point of view, and but I would also be comfortable with a female narrator if they were able to like perform those voices well. I do have a prequel that is told from the perspective of 2 men, and that one would need a male narrator. So.
Yes, of course. But I mean, that's an interesting thing. It's like if you have the being an indie author, you have full rights to choose things. So it's kind of fun, but there's a lot of options sometimes. And so for me, I have female leads, but two of my series are male dominated in the sense of characters. And so I
Yeah.
had to like, rack my brain of what I wanted for each of them. And so again, testing everything at the moment, I have a female narrator, a male narrator, and a voice cast. So I'm trying all three options to see what I like going forward. And I do think each particular project has whatever it is right for that project. So you just have to
Yeah.
figure it out. But
Yeah.
good luck with that. That's kind of cool. That's
Thank
exciting.
you. It is on my list.
Yeah, yes. And I mean, I'm just so new on it, and like any platform or medium, you have to build your presence. So I'm still trying to get my presence known that I now have audiobooks starting to populate. And but I've heard a lot of people say that that's a wonderful way to go once you make that jump. So
yeah,
hopefully you do.
I want my books to be accessible to as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that when I released The Sneaky Lass, I had several people message me and ask, when are you going to have it on audiobook? And of course, the answer was, I don't know.
I know that feeling.
It was like 8 months ago. And of course, like it was my first book being released. And it was like, as soon as I know anything about audiobooks and have some money, I will look into that. And I still have all of those emails so that when it comes out, I can email them back and be like, hey, it's on audiobook.
I wish I did that from the start, because I published my first book in 2016 and I always do everything the wrong way or the slowest way possible.
Yeah.
I know that. I fully admit it. That's why I'm like, do what I say, not what I've done, because it is a slow route for me to get to where I am at the moment. But I wish I had done that when I joined this platform. I've never made a true viral video at the moment. Let's change this. Never done that successfully yet. But with that said, I had one that trended pretty well, and it was for my Viking fantasy, and at the time it didn't have an audiobook, and it was one of the reasons why I was like, I really should put one out there, was because I had so many questions of, can I get it in audio? Can I get it in audio? And so I went back and started pulling out all the handles, and I had them in a file saying, when I release, I'm going to just tag the handles about my release post. And I did that just to be like, hey, if you were serious, it's out now.
Yeah.
No obligation, of course, but it's here. You asked. I delivered.
Yeah, you asked. It's been a while. Sorry.
Sometimes things take time. So when did you begin writing your work? Like, what was it that inspired you? Yes, right now I'm going to write my book.
The birth of my son. So my first child, I have a history in singing, and my history in vocal arts was that I know a lot of songs. So I have a large repertoire of everything from like Spanish operas, Italian arias, Broadway show tunes. But what I mostly sang to my son when he was born were sea shanties and folk songs.
That's
and
so cool.
He had terrible colic and a dairy allergy, and we were up every 90 minutes all night long for like the first year of his life. And so I spent a lot of time in the rocking chair with him in the middle of the night humming sea shanties and folk songs. And I started thinking of who sang these songs, and then those questions started appearing, like, what are these instruments that I'm hearing? The concertina, the Spanish guitar, the fiddle. And I was like, who played these instruments? Where did you get these instruments? Who were the people who knew how to play them? Who were the people who sang them? And that got me interested in the history of ships and the history of long haul shanties and short haul shanties. And the more I read about it in the middle of the night while he's on my chest, and you're singing and looking through your phone, and the more I learned about it, the more I started imagining characters for these songs, and imagining chapters that would explain the lyrics. And so many of them tell these long ballads, and it was like, I want to write that ballad. How did this song get written? And so that's actually how it all started, was singing songs to my son. And I started writing while he was asleep, and then it just kind of careened into what it is now, which is this kind of epic romantic historical saga. So
That's so fantastic. So, your first book, did you dedicate it to anybody, and who did you dedicate it to?
dedicated to my children.
I was hoping you would say that. I was like, based off that whole prior story. That's so cool.
Yes, Rosalind and Wesley. They're
I love
dedicated to
that.
them.
Great names. Great
Thank you.
names. Yeah. Comment pop-ups say good ideas. I've been asked about audiobooks too. So yes, if you have been asked about your audiobooks, try to start noting handles or emails so you can send something out, and just no obligation, but because you asked.
Yeah.
Never know.
Yeah,
Can make some
making those connections with audiobook narrators too. There's so many here on Book Talk that you kind of learn as you watch them go. So.
Yeah, one of mine, for my female narrator, Blanca Frappier, she's on here as well, and so I'm hoping when our first, because the 12 Tasks is our first audiobook, and we press the go-ahead this week for it to do the final conversion, so in the next couple weeks it should be out and available, but once that's possible, I want to do one of these one-on-ones with her, so she can talk about the narration side of things, and I can talk about the writing side of things, about audio and the whole process, and of course the book. But fun stuff it is. But yeah, and that's so cool. But I love that. I love hearing origin stories of the books themselves. Like, what inspired it? Where did you make that connection that I'm going to be an author and I'm going to make this happen?
Yeah. Well, the idea of becoming an author didn't even happen until less than a year ago. I was just writing them. And then I kind of had 6 books that I was just sitting on, and I bound them myself so that I could have something to hold. And then I was just like, oh, maybe I could publish. And I jumped into a couple writer groups, and then I've gotten incredibly lucky through this entire process. It's like, some dino author took me under her wing and showed me everything, and how to make a Goodreads account, and how to set up KDP, and how to send out ARCs, and how to be on BookFunnel.
I think everybody needs one of those people.
Yeah. And so like, I'm like, I don't even talk to her. I barely know her. And she just, her name's Ren Michaels. She's on here. She writes romance, and she just like took me under her wing, and every question I had, I sent to her. And then she had me join the group where I asked for editors, and I met my editor. And it's just, I've gotten incredibly lucky just by networking within the circles of authors. And it's such a community. And I've gotten very lucky to just kind of inch my way into it.
It is such a fun community, and it is such a great way that, if you have a question, you just reach out to someone. And I've in my experience, almost always everybody's been happy to try to answer or help out or give you hints or tips or tricks or whatever, or point you in the right direction. My issue, I know early on, was I didn't know what I didn't know. So I didn't know what to ask. I didn't know what to look up, because all I was doing was staring at my account and be like, why is it not making sales? What am I doing wrong? I was doing so many things wrong, but I didn't know.
Hi, Jen.
At the time.
Yeah, right. I remember doing that with the ISBNs, and I just like went to the 20 books to 50K group on Facebook and was like, so can anybody just tell me literally everything about ISBNs? And they did.
That's kind of cool. But like, again, if you don't know what you don't know, and that is one of those things, I think some authors make mistakes, or I guess it's not necessarily a mistake, but it just depends how you view it. The whole thing where it's easy, yes, to let Zahn use their ISBN, though it's, in my personal taste, better if you own rights to it. But you may not know that because you didn't know to even look that up or ask.
Yeah, absolutely.
I see some of your fans are chiming in now. I love it. I absolutely love it.
I've got some dedicated folks.
That's good. That's what every author wants, is those super fans.
Yep. Hi, Tanya. I forwarded her book for an audio person just the other day. So.
Ooh, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So let me ask you then, so your spin-offs, you're creating you haven't published your spin-offs, but you have them planned some which way or shape or form.
Yes, so I've started writing a spin-off series that's going to include some characters that we're just starting to meet in the main series. And it serves as both like a spin-off with its own story and its own trajectory, while also serving as sort of an epilogue to these characters that everybody's going to have spent 7 books with.
Yeah.
Is
hard to say goodbye.
Yeah, is I didn't want people to be like, oh, and then they all lived happily ever after and we never found out what happened to them again. And so I started writing this spin-off series, and through that spin-off series was able to kind of weave in what happened to those characters after we say goodbye to them at the end of book 7. And there's also a prequel duology that is it tells the story of 2 sailors aboard Sneaky Lass. So when Jane gets onto that ship, there's this couple, Mickey and Hugh, and gay couples were very common on pirate ships and during the golden age of piracy. And so I wanted to add that into my book. I'm a part of the LGBTQ community, and I always start out wanting to write a straight romance, and then it just kind of gets all queer and dark. And
you can write whatever you want. I mean, come on.
I was always like, I'm going to write a pirate romance between a man and a woman. And it's like, and she's described as a man the whole time. And we're going to get there eventually. And we do. But A Glorious Mess is my prequel, and it has its sequel to make the duology happen coming out this June. And it tells the story of that romance while also telling the story of how this Navy brig turned into a pirate brig and the mutiny that takes place to make that happen. And we get to meet Captain Bennett Holt as like an 18-year-old soon to be lieutenant in the Navy. And, you know, so I really let my historian flag fly and went like full Navy, delved deep into those like archives and wrote that book too.
I love that. I love that. So are you intending to continue fleshing out your world and just letting it expand, or do you ever want to create a whole new world from a totally different series down the line, or have you thought of it that way? Because I know once you invest so much time in world building and creating, you know, this rich environment, it's fun to continue to expand, but on the other hand, you may want to one day be like, I want to now write about, you know, another era history for whatever reason. But
yeah, I definitely have. I also have things that I'm sitting on right now. So I have a whole different world already created and fleshed out that I've written a whole book in that's just kind of waiting. And it's waiting until I'm ready and waiting until, because right now, you know, I've promised a rapid release. And so these books are coming and I am releasing them. And this is like my whole world has become the world of the Silver Locket for the time being. And but there are other things always happening. Like I said, I write almost 60,000 words a month most months, and that means that I have vampire books that I've written. I have a sort of like medieval historical that I've written. I have a couple things that I'm just waiting, and they're going to come out one day. And I have an opportunity for one that's going to come out in a bit of a collection, hopefully. So I have a couple things in the works that are outside of the realm of this world. And for now, I'm happy to just hang out in this one. But sometimes you just get sick to death of these people. And it's like, you know what? I'm going to spend the next...
any people. Yeah. Like any people you're hanging out with too much. I understand. There's going to be the moment.
You're just like, you know what? And you put it down, and for 3 weeks, you just write something completely different. And whether it's good or not, you just save it, put it in a folder, and, you know, save it to the drive, and we'll look at that again later. Next time I'm sick of you people.
Yeah, like right now, since I am doing these 2 series simultaneously, I guess that way I'm never sick of my characters, because I'm like, okay, it's time for me to put a pause on the series and to go and give the other series some more of attention, and it keeps things a little more fresh that way. On the other hand, it gets very complicated because I have to remember what world I am, who I'm dealing with, where they are, what has recently happened, and so it also makes things more complicated. So don't necessarily recommend that approach to publish 2 simultaneously series-wise, but to each their own. Clearly I'm doing it, because I do everything the opposite way.
And same with like books, you know, so by having so many books written that I'm working
Mhm.
on relatively simultaneously because of the way this rapid release is happening, you know, it's like I'm gonna proofread, like do self edits on book 5 while my editor has book 4, while I write the last couple of chapters to a fine tangle, and just kind of like,
Mhm.
you know, you're able to be like, wow, I hate everything about book 5 right now. Just gonna put that over here, and I'm going to focus instead on, you know, whatever it is, that weird plot hole that I left in book 6, or
Mhm.
whatever it is.
Yep, exactly. So let me ask before I forget, because I've been going around and trying to figure out best time to ask this question. You've been writing or published. You said you've been published for a year and a half, or writing since a year and a half to like make it as an
I've been
author.
writing since my son was born,
Okay,
so
yeah, so a couple
about
few years ago.
3 years. I've been published since last June.
Last
So
June. That's so neat.
yeah,
But
so
okay, so
about a year ago, a little less
yeah,
than a year ago, I joined Book
oh
Talk, and
yes,
this was like the first thing I did was like, I am going to publish my book, and I need to make a TikTok.
There you go. I love it. So when you're trying to talk about your ideal, because this is a question that people always ask, and I stumble upon this one because I'm a person who writes what I like and never originally thought of what readers to approach. So, and that's fine. It's just a different approach. Um, do you know who your ideal readership is? Like, who would you market towards? Would it be that readers are Outlander because you were talking about romance and history with a little sub things of some kind of fantasy, or is it someone else? Or do you know? Because it's okay not to know. It's always a good question to think about.
I wish I knew. I I definitely have told people, like, if you like the Outlander series, you'll probably like my books. They have a very similar tone. They have a lot
Mhm.
of dark themes, and so I always feel
Okay.
comfortable being like, if you've read Outlander, then you're not going to be offended by anything in my books, because I know that that's I Kersha says masochists. Yeah,
Excellent problem.
masochists read my books. They're going to hurt. I also know generally that like I hang out in a lot of the LGBTQ book reading groups on Facebook because I have this MM prequel that and so I that one gets a different audience than a lot of
Mhm.
books just because of the relationship that's in it. Um,
Yeah.
and then I've also just sort of accidentally been adopted into like spicy dark romance book talk, which isn't what my books are, but all of my friends are there. And so when I posted, you know, I post about my books, there's a lot of overlap. So it's like it's a
Mhm.
historical, it's a fantasy, but it's also about pirates, and there's a myth about pirates that
Mhm.
attracts a lot of fantasy readers, and so I can just sort of accidentally hop on that train too. And I've learned to just roll with it because,
I like that. I like that.
yeah, because early on it was like you almost wanted to stop people, like, oh no, it's actually more of a historical. And the, you know, when you meet fantasy people who are interested, and now I'm just like, it's got fantasy elements, go forth. You
Yeah.
know, and my friend,
Well, oh yeah,
uh,
sorry, continue.
I was just gonna say, you know, like a lot of my friends on here are part of the like dark romance and fantasy romance genres, and then just because they're my friends and they've read my books, they, you know, then their friends read my books, and now that's kind of the niche I hang out on in book talk. When I hashtag my videos, it's like hashtag fantasy romance, hashtag moms who read smut, and it's like
Yeah.
here we are. So I just wherever I fit.
Oh, I think that's great. There is and I've mentioned this a few times on these lives because for me it was one of those. It made so much sense, but someone had to say it, and then it was like, oh yeah, kind of things. I think the book was called Seven Figure Fiction, and the author wrote it is in the fantasy, one of the fantasy genres, um, heavy into the fantasy, so not fantasy, heavy in the romance. She's a romance writer, heavy in the romance, dabbles in some of these other genres, but her approach was, and kind of the point of the book is, when you figure out trying to market your work, anything from your book blurbs on Zon or whatever, try to make it relatable to as wide a group as possible, even if that theme, sub theme, idea, topic is minor. It could pull someone in and allow someone who may never have thought I am into a romantasy love it because their interest is in pirates or maybe dark fantasy or whatever. And so it's finding ways and words and turns of phrases to be as accessible as possible to a wide range of people as possible, because you could convert people who, yeah, never thought about it. Oh, there you go. Seven figure fantasy fiction. Okay. I couldn't remember if seven figure fiction or seven, but I know the cover, unless you changed it, is bright yellow.
There,
But
I've
yeah,
written
I
it
thought that was,
down.
yeah, I was gonna say I read it and like, she admittedly says, I am a romance writer, so a lot of my examples are romance based, but the concepts, the overall concepts, can be applied to any author. And I found it pretty neat, and so I'm still trying to figure out how to make it work for me. But it's just, I thought it was really neat, just because it's like, if you have the concept of a mother and son relationship, or two siblings that um don't necessarily get along, if you figure out how to mention something like that in your promos, people who have those relationships or understand those concepts feel that connection and may give your book a chance.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so, like, my prequels are I'll just be totally frank. So my main series does really well, and my prequel does not. And that's just some books do better than others. It just is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And A Glorious Mess, and I think that it has a couple things working against it. It's a prequel, so it doesn't show up on like your main series page on the Zon, so it's harder for people to find. It is an romance when most of my readers are going to be like reading mostly straight couples. And so I found that my best way of marketing that book is to talk about tropes. And I don't know anything about tropes, but it does work. And so like I actually asked people who read the book, was like, what tropes would you give this book? And everybody said a different one. And I thought that was really interesting, that it was like, some people were like, it's a grumpy sunshine book. And I'm like, I'll write it down,
I didn't know that one. I like that.
Yeah. And so like, there's all these different people who came forward and were like, this is the main trope in your book. And every single one of them was different. And so now when I go into those groups where they're like, tell us about your book that matches these requirements, I'm like, I have got one of those. Here's my image that I made in Canva with all the different tropes next to it. And that way people are like, oh, it has all 9 of these things in it, like whatever it is.
No, that's cool. I should probably do that. That's pretty neat, the idea of polling your readers and being like, hey, what tropes or, do you see? What themes did, struck you as something? Because I feel like I'm looking at it with certain eyes, but someone else could approach it with different eyes and be able to give, a different name to one of the concepts that's already in it, which could help reach new people.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of cool. The grumpy one is soft for the sunshine. I like that. Oh, that's so cool. See, I learn things new every time I do one of these. And I think that's the new thing I've learned, is like, now I have to go and poll people and ask them what they got out of it, because definitely that would help market. And I think maybe every author should do this at least once. Now, go and do this. If you're an author, do this. Poll your readers and see what tropes they came out with, because it may not be what you thought you put in there. They could come out with some other ones that you had it put in there and inserted that you didn't know. That's neat.
Or even one that like you just think that's just one chapter and part of the book. It just doesn't resonate, to you. It's just something that you wrote and you added it into the book. And to them, it's their favorite chapter of their book, because it is the trope they were looking for.
It is the trope. I've been waiting for that. Because like for me, I will say I'm not a romance writer, but all my books incorporate some level of romance at some point in there, because romance is part of life. And to not have any in there would be weird. So with that said, it's interesting. Like, I go more for the action and, my darker sides of the fantasy, a little more the grit and stuff. And that's what my focal point usually ends up being, for the action adventure and questing and all this kind of stuff. But when I started delving into this concept of these tropes that at first I wasn't going to ever mention, because it's not the big themes of the book, which is, I have enemies to lovers. I have a love triangle in one of mine. I have some of these that would speak to romance readers, but I'm like, but it's not a romance. Should I mention them? Should I not? But I guess it never hurts. They can decide. They can be like, it wasn't for me, but it wasn't, what I was looking for. I wanted a true romance story. I'm like, oh, sorry. I write
Yeah.
epic side of fantasy.
I've had a couple people, even though I am writing a romance, I've had a couple people in the comments be like, this is not a romance in my reviews. And they're like, I still enjoyed it. It had a romantic subplot. And it's just because like the adventure and the fantasy and the history and the world building, sometimes like, you know, people who are readers of romance are looking for different things. And
Yeah.
and I know that for me, I am not interested. You always say, if it doesn't have a romantic plot in it somewhere, I'm not interested. And I don't know why that is. Maybe I'm just broken that way. But, you know, for me, if you said, this is my fantasy and it has a romantic subplot with an enemies to lovers, I would be like, got this book.
Slow burn and all this. And that's the thing. I need to learn more of those terminologies because I probably have more of that in my books than I realize. I just don't cater to it. You know,
Yeah.
But that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So let me ask, since we're rounding the end of the hour, time flies. We're rounding the end of the hour. Let me first and foremost say, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you, follow you on other places? Are you on other places? Do you have a website? Give us the basics.
Okay. Well, the places I am every single day. I am here on TikTok every single day at Kennedy Sutton. Go ahead and give me a follow. The other place I am every single day is my Facebook group for fans, which is Sutton Silver Locket Crew. I post excerpts, I post chapters, I post, you know, future works, what I'm doing. I do everything goes there. All my short stories go there. They're my crew. There's 127 of them, and they all are amazing. And yeah, that's my favorite place to hang out because it's just people who love me and my books. And
a little ego boost in the day. You love me. Thank you.
Yes, exactly. I just show up and I'm like, hello, crew, all 127 of my very best friends. Here's what I'm doing this morning. And I'm also on Facebook as Kennedy Sutton and Instagram as author Kennedy Sutton. But TikTok and my Facebook group are the places to find me and what I'm up to. And those are both linked in my bio here. And you can buy my books on Amazon, and you can read them for free in Kindle Unlimited. And you can buy signed copies that come with bookmarks and really just whatever I feel like throwing into the box on my Etsy shop. And they're the exact same price as they are on Amazon. So, you know, you can go and get merch with your books for the same price.
That's always, yeah, that's kind of what I do too, is I have like a book, I give different bookmarks and book stickers out with my signed copies and price them the same, comparable to Amazon. So if people want the little extra, buy direct.
Yeah.
Now I will admit shipping is extra because I am still an indie author here, but
yeah,
the medium price is the same.
It's media mail. It's media mail.
Media mail. I do. I use that and abuse that. Media mail all the time. Yeah, that's the one thing is because I am running this Kickstarter and have about 2 weeks left for my book. I did have to go to the post office. I was like, how big of a box? Is there a size cap for media mail? Because I'm about to send out some big bundles. And they're like, no, just understand, you know, they'll be, you know, they potentially could be searched just to prove that you're sending only books. I'm like, that's okay. Don't lose any of them when you search them. But they're gonna be media, and that's where I'm shipping them.
Our little post office here. I live in a small town. I live in a small town outside of a small town in Tennessee, and our post office is a one-room building. The PO boxes are a mailbox on the outside of the building. There's chickens walking around the front. I love it. And there's one lady who works there, and my son comes in with big piles of books to ship out, and he always runs in and says, Mama's shipping more books, you know, and like his 3-year-old list. And everybody knows us.
I love it. Absolutely love it. So one last question I do want to make sure I ask you is there anything that we haven't covered that you would love people to know about you, your work, anything you would want to talk about or ask before the end of the hour?
I don't think so.
I'm just making sure we don't cut off the video and you're like, wait, I wanted to talk about this.
One more thing. Yeah, no.
I have an upcoming release. So when's your next upcoming release?
My next upcoming release is going to be book 4 in the Silver Locket series. It's called Witch or Bloom, and it comes out March 15th.
There, see? You had one more thing. I knew it.
I did. I had one more thing. And I guess I could go ahead and just tell everybody that you should go check out A Glorious Mess. It's my prequel, and nobody knows it exists. Everybody should go see it. All 8 of you.
Yes. Well, now you just need to find the tropes to like reach a bunch of people and connect with them. All these things we've talked about today. But yeah, definitely check out her prequel. Follow her as well, or me. Just say
everybody.
And I guess the only news I have of note that I am pushing is released my 3rd audiobook, narrated by George Blagden. He was a British actor who played Athelstan on the Vikings series, so wonderful voice. And my Kickstarter is running for the 3rd book of the Underrealms. Check it out if you like the extra bookish stuff between like bookmarks and stickers and character art and special goodies. That's all on my links page on my thing. So check out our links pages too and see what we have. Yay. And I will be posting all her content below when I repurpose this on YouTube.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming out today and chatting. If at any point, because you sound very prolific, if at any point, I'm stumbling over my words, blah, blah, blah. At any point you would want to come back and do one of these again at a later date, let me know.
All right. Well, anytime. I love getting on lives, but I never know how to get onto lives. So I'm always too shy to like get on a live all by myself. So
well, now you know me. You can always just be like, hey, can I just jump on with you one week and we'll plan it out.
Perfect.
Well, thank you and have a fantastic day. It is about time for me to get back to the editing.
Oh, fun. I have to get back to momming.
That's okay. That's probably more important than the editing, but we'll go from there.
Equally important.
Okay. Well, thank you, and I will talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
for having me.
Thanks for joining.
Bye.